Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I'm Chris.
I'm Jordan with PDQ.com.
All right, welcome to the show. It has been a minute with no PowerShell webcast, so I'm particularly excited about this.
Yeah, but with a lot of our Q&As, if someone says, can you do this, and we don't have a built-in way, the answer is you could probably do it with SQL. So we probably figured we might want to talk about how to use PowerShell to connect to SQL.
Yes, it's a good topic. So we've got a lot, as we normally do. I speak really quickly, so we'll see if I can get through it. Essentially, what I wanted to cover this topic for this webcast was many of us in our different environments have a bunch of disparate databases, whether it be SQLite that our products, PDQ Deploy and PDQ Inventory use, SQL Server, MySQL, MariaDB, name a bunch of them. Everybody uses databases just about everywhere, right?
Yep.
So we wanted to kind of give a little bit of an intro into how to interact with those databases, and at the bare minimum, how you could connect to them, and then you fill in the blanks, the user to go out and do the things that you need to do. So I just want to call that out because we're not going to be doing much of a deep dive, although I will give a little bit of examples along the way. All
right, well, let's dive in. I think we're starting with MySQL because it's the most used.
Essentially, yeah. So MySQL, so I looked up on, I think, Stack Overflow, and I realized that the top 5 or 6 databases that were in use, according to their surveys, were MySQL or MariaDB, SQL Server, SQLite, Postgres. I think MongoDB was up there, but it was the only NoSQL one up there, so I didn't include it in today's webcast. If people are interested, just maybe email us at webcast@pdq.com, and maybe we can do something on MongoDB or different NoSQL databases, but I'm not including that today. But what I am going to start with is MySQL and MariaDB. For those of you who don't know, MariaDB is a fork of MySQL. When it was initially believed that MySQL was purchased by another company and was going to be paid, blah, blah, blah. So they, right now at least, they're on diverging paths, but they're kind of interchangeable for a lot of the connectors and a lot of the commands that you can run. So what I'm showing you here for MySQL should apply to MariaDB.
Okay.
But first and foremost, one of the things I do want to cover with this is the difference between using an ODBC connection, which is a,
I looked it up as it is a online database connector.
Close?
Close.
You got words somewhat right. It's the open database connection. It's this centralized way of accessing a database that's database agnostic, so that you can define your code, but then swap out databases with different types of databases, and you don't have to update your code in your application. That's kind of the universal, easy to connect to something. So I will be showing that, as well as individual, what are known as connectors, or these drivers to connect individually to MySQL. In the case here, and these should be in the bonus content, I believe, the URLs to go download these, but the MySQL connector, you just go to MySQL's website and go look for the, in this case, .NET connector, because PowerShell and .NET are best friends. So we went and grabbed that, and I'm actually going to add that so that I can reference all the different assemblies here.
Okay. So was MySQL the one where the first link you see looks like you're downloading, but just the connector, but you're downloading the whole thing? You want to go a little bit lower on the download?
Yeah, it's a little bit weird on the website. Just look in the bottom right for the actual download button. There's 2, but bottom right, it's kind of wacky. But so here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run things here line by line. The bonus content, we should have copies of these scripts that I'm going over, but I'm not going into each script. Don't run the script as is, because I'm going to be running it in sections. I will update the bonus content with it broken out after the webcast. I just wanted them all together for the webcast because it's easier for presentation. But essentially what you want to do is officially reference this guy right here, which is the DLL for the actual classes and for MySQL, the connector that you can use to then connect to and query a database. What I have done, I've also exported my credentials. For those who don't know how to do this, let's say I have a credential that I want to create, get credential. It's going to prompt me for credential and my username, and I misspelled it, and some password. That's going to store that value in credential. You can export this using a command called export CLI XML, and the path you export that to creates a XML file with the username, well, basically the actual serialized object of the credential, the PS credential, which then you can import into another session, which I'm doing up here.
So it's worth noting this way, that credential will only be able to be imported if you're running that machine with that logged on user.
Yes.
If it's going to be multiple people using it, you want to use a key file as
Yes.
well that you can specify.
Exactly. You don't have to build that PS credential on your own. I do have a separate blog and I think video or webcast on that. Go check them out if you have more questions. I'm not going to spend much more time on there, but that's kind of the magic that's going on here. So like I said, let's do it in chunks. And right here, I'm going to be hitting this button, which is run selection, or in many cases, I'm just going to hit the keyboard, but I'm going to run this to start storing some information bit by bit. I have a few queries here. I've set up a Futurama database in this MySQL setup, and I have a delete query, a create query, an insert query, and a select query. So I'm going to select all of those so that I can store those into memory and run the selection. And then we're just going to dive right into it. This is where it gets fun, at least fun for me. Fun for you?
I'm sure it will be in the future when I get better at this.
Well, good. All right. So essentially, this is going to be true for just about any database you interact with. You're going to want to reach out to a database with a set of parameters that say, hey, I want to connect to this guy with this port, with this username and this password and all the different varieties of extra information you want to provide in order to authenticate yourself so that you can connect to and get data. So I'm going to be creating that connection string is what it's called. Oh, and this, it's not in the bonus content. I will get it up there, or someone will maybe. I think it's connectionstrings.com if you ever have any questions. This is where I got that. So if I pull up Chrome and go to connectionstrings.com, you're going to find a bunch of connection string examples for all sorts of databases that are out there. So if I wanted to know about MySQL, I could show that here. It's fantastic. And that's what I'm using, is this one right here. So
yeah, no, that's nice just because there seems to be a bunch of, they're mostly the same, but there's a bunch of subtle changes. So if instead of trying to trial and error, there is a nice place to go and find it all, I guess.
yeah, it is. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a connection string, and then from that, I'm going to create a connection, and then from the connection and the query, I'm going to create a command. See, this kind of gets into the PowerShell .NET gray area for those of you who are into PowerShell, or maybe getting into PowerShell. We're creating a bunch of different types of objects that kind of interact together to get us this information. So in this case, I'm just going to run these four first to run this selection, and I want to show you what they look like. So in the case here with connection string, you'll see the password as I'm expanding there, but it's just some local DB that's okay if the password's shown. So I'm okay with that. And you'll see that all that information expands to that. It's wonderful. It's easy to use. And then we're going to create this, we already created this connection object. The great thing is once you establish all this, you then have to open it like I did in that last command of the selection. Because in order to query a database, you have to open a connection to it. Cool?
All right, and this is kind of just a quick throw-in, but we do open all the time, but a lot of times you don't see it close at the end of it, and that's just bad practice. It will still work in the future, but it's just, you have a lot of connections that are unhandled if you don't close it at the end, I guess.
Yeah, this is, like Jordan mentioned, you might see this a lot in the wild. Be aware. Always close your connections, and in some cases, which what we're going to do here with this execute reader method, this command, it'll basically give you the results, give you a reader object, but you can't do anything else with that object except close the connection, and that's because this particular one is forward reading, fast, and doesn't allow you to do anything else. So let's just run it. So what I'm going to do is create that, take that query which I did up here as part of the command. I defined a command. The command had my select query, which was, let's go find out, because I just ran it up top, select query. It's use Futurama, which says use Futurama database, and then select star from characters. Select every column and every row in the characters table. And so we're going to select this and run the selection. And voila, we get a result back with 6 characters from Futurama. And that's that. I close the reader, close the connection, and voila, it's done. I can go do it again. I can do as many times as I want. In fact, I'll hide the entire thing and run, and we get the command back. So.
Yeah, and I think of this one where your connection strings are already defined, you probably could just start with the open and run with it over and over again. It would,
yes, you're right.
Work.
That is correct. One of the things that I do want to call out here, though, is there's a few different types here. So here we have the execute reader. There's also, and I'm going to show this here, execute. There is, the important ones are execute non-query, execute reader, and execute scalar. So execute reader is going to give, you're going out, getting the results from a query and bringing them back, and you're going to show them. You're going to iterate through them and list them. A non-query is when you're going through and doing an update, doing an insert, doing a delete, something that's not giving you back a result set. And a scalar is when you're expecting back one result. And if you want to dive into more of those, go into the documentation for MySQL in this case, or any database system, and you'll kind of get a better explanation than I'm going to go into here. But that's a really simple overview of what they are. But they're available in the case of wanting to run those commands above, like delete, which we can. We can actually change that to delete, but I'm not going to do that at the moment. I want to show you a more, I'm not going to say better way of doing this, but just a little more easy to conceptualize way of doing this, perhaps, which is where we're going to create a data set and a data adapter. And if I'm ever going through this too fast, I don't know if we have, you have any questions along the way, just let me know and I'll stop. Because this is, like I said, we're just trying to get through all this data for all these different database systems. And so here what we're doing, same thing, connection string, connection, and then we're going to create a data adapter and a data set, which is to say I have a data set, something that I want to store data in, and a data adapter is kind of like a bridge or a tunnel to a database to say, hey, funnel that data I'm looking for into this data set. And so that's what we're doing here. We're actually filling the data set via the data adapter. And so I'll just show you just running this straight up. I'm going to select everything here and do run selection. And we get the exact same results. So 2 ways to do the same thing, but in this case, with a data set and data adapter method, you can store multiple results, multiple queries into into an array here in the actual data set. So you can actually store multiple results and then query through them and handle your data offline, maybe update your data. Maybe you wanted to add some more characters and then you can update that via the data adapter.
So I'm seeing in this one we're not using any like the scalar or the query or the non-query. Yep. So is it something where this is just a fourth option outside of those ones and we only have to use those in the top method, or?
Yes. Okay. This is just a way to kind of better handle non-specific data, I guess. This is a little more generic. Okay. And it can hold multiple sets of queries that you do at once. In the case of, say, the execute reader that I was telling you, once you run that once, you can't go run that again without finalizing and closing the connection. And then you have to open it again and run it again and so on and so forth. Because the whole premise is you want to open a connection to a database, do your stuff, and close it, because you don't want to maintain an open connection to that database. It's costly. And so the same thing happens here. I'm going to open this connection, create my data set, my data adapter, fill it, and then at that point, because the data set and the data adapter, they allow you to update that data and then send those updates back. In this case, I don't have an example set up here specifically, but before I close it, if I run this selection again, so I haven't run the close here, I will have the, I believe it's the data adapter. I'm just doing data adapter dot to show the same thing that you'll see if you do get member. So if I run this command, you'll see a bunch of properties and methods that are available. And here, there is an update method that is available. And what you can do is in the data adapter, you can update the property for update command, I believe. Okay. And then you can run an update. So I can change one of the characters' names in this table, and then feed that into the update command via what's called, I think, a command builder. Again, this is deep diving stuff. And then I can go update that and send those updates back to the database. So in this case, the data set and data adapter is a two-way, whereas the other ones were one-way. If that makes sense.
All right.
Cool. All right. Moving on. This is another thing, and I'm spending more time on MySQL. I'm not going to do the same thing on the other ones because I just want to build this foundation a little bit here. Those of you who've worked with databases may or may not be familiar with a term called SQL Injection or SQL Injection attack. Have you heard that term?
I have not.
Okay, so essentially it's you have a query that you write or is in your application or is on some website, trying for a login. Maybe it's asking for a username and a password. If you build your query like this, and I have it called the unsafe select query, what's going to happen is it's going to take user input and put that into your query directly here as a string, and then it's going to take that entire string and then try and interpret that when you run the query, which means people can do dangerous things, and I'm going to show that. So let's run it. And then I'll get into what a parameterized query is. So I'm going to highlight this and run it, and it's going to prompt me to enter a name. So let's pick a character name.
Start with Bender.
Bender. B-E-N-D-E-R. Bender. And there we go.
I do.
Yeah, would you all agree that Bender actually was a result? Awesome. We'll do it again. I have nothing up my sleeves. They're short sleeves. Fry. Sorry, I can't help myself. Fry. We get fry. It's fantastic. Now, because it's unsafe, because of this taking of the user input and putting it directly into that string, I can start to think maliciously, dangerously, cheesy even, and put in what might not be an expected query, and I'll show you. So let's say, in this case, the query is saying select everything, select star, from characters where name equals the user input. So, we're trying to say, oh, select something from this character's table with one user. Well, I'm going to show you something fun. What if, instead of doing a user, I decide to finish out the query, so I just type, well, let's do this first. Fry! I'll hit enter and show you that should have no results. So I'll do it again.
That's not a real character.
It's not. I'm going to finish this up, pretending that I'm still writing in the middle of the query. I'm going to close that, finish off that query, and I'm going to pretend like I'm continuing on the SQL itself, and do one where, fry, or 1 equals 1, finish that off, and comment out the rest of the query that is the unsafe select query. If I run this, notice what I got back. All the things. This is the reason I want to call out here, even though we're not doing a deep dive. When you're interacting with these databases, be safe. Don't write queries that people can do injection techniques like this if you can get around it. And I'm going to show you how to get around that. We're going to move down to the parameterized version of this, which if you want more information and more detail about this, you can find in MySQL's documents. But the only difference is, the main difference is this right here. Is I'm taking the command that I created and I'm saying, I'm going to add some parameters with the value, in this case @name, which references a variable inside the query, and then I'm going to use the user input. And also change it up here in the actual query itself to select star from characters where name equals @name. So let's do the same thing. Let's run, trying to fit this all in one window. Okay. Run this selection, and we'll do it again. We'll do Bender. Let me get Bender. You can ignore the stuff above this because that's actually the output from this line right here, telling me that I have added this parameter.
So if you did like an out null at the end of that, would it crash the whole thing because then there's no input to put in there, or would it just skip that part?
What do you think?
I think it would probably fail because you're not passing through the actual name at that point.
Well, in this case, out null is going to redirect the output to null. So
yeah.
Let's run it. Let's run the selection. We'll do it again. Bender. There you go.
Oh.
So, all right. Well, let's continue that. So we can do Bender. We presumably can do fry. Yep. Notice it's not case sensitive. I cannot do fry. It's not going to give me a result back. And I'm going to try that devious thing that malicious Chris here did, which was we'll do fry whatever, and then or 1 equals 1. Finish that off and try commenting it out. And I'm going to run this. And on the unsafe query, when it was not parameterized, this worked and gave me a list of all accounts, all records in that table. Here it does nothing. Magic. All the things up my sleeves are not coming out.
Seems like a much better way. So I guess my question is that I forgot in the middle as soon as I started it. Was with this one, does the @name, does it have to be actual name of one of the columns in the table, or can you name that anything and it just looks for something specific?
That's a fantastic question. I want to show you. I'm going to call it something fancy. And I probably should have copied and pasted this. So spelling is, yeah, good.
Nailed it.
Nailed it. Right. Let's run it again. Let's try. Let's just try fry. Voila.
Okay.
So just to demonstrate that it doesn't matter. In this case, I'm just defining a variable here in the script, and I'm saying, oh, for that variable in that script, add it with this value. Now, the difference between the other query, when it was straight up interpretation of like the string that was there for the query as it puts the user input in this case, what it's saying is I have this parameter, take the user input in this case, or whatever input I decide to put in there, treat it exactly as is. Escape all the things, escape the characters. That's just a straight up string. It's not going to interpret that as extra commands in MySQL. So it won't add those dashes as a comment. I mean, it'll just, it's saying, I want to know that this particular name equals this. And so you can protect yourself from SQL injection attacks, at least from one big surface area that's exposed with SQL injection attacks. So, whew. We keeping up with me? I don't know.
That's one.
Yeah. So I'm gonna move on. I don't know if we've stop me if you must, but we'll go on. Postgres. So here with Postgres, again, we're just defining all the information here at the top. I'm just going to run a really simple command that selects the dat name from the PG underscore database. So just get the list of the main databases in a typical install of Postgres.
So I am seeing a pattern here, even though this one isn't an offshoot of MySQL. It's still the format is pretty much the same, just with minor changes in the syntax.
Yes.
So we're doing the same thing, just you have to learn the syntax for whatever database you're accessing.
Exactly. And in this case, you want to know the connection string, and that might be particular to the different database system you're using. So go check that out, connectionstrings.com, or reference the given database's documentation, and you should be able to find that. In this case, I also needed to get the Postgres ODBC driver from this link up here, which is also in the bonus content, I believe. And once I got that and installed it, I could find out that this is the driver that I wanted to use. Right there, the Postgres Unicode 64-bit. There is a PowerShell command to find what is installed. For those who are familiar with the ODBC command in Windows, ODBC, looking for my data sources, I'll just do 64-bit. Oh, erase that. And the drivers tab, here's a list of the drivers that are there. But you can actually do that from PowerShell. Get ODBC driver and get a list of all the drivers that are there. So in this case, if I wanted to know more about, is there one for Postgres? Postgres. There we go. I found 4, actually. So this is what I did earlier, and I just picked the Postgres Unicode one and implemented that here in the driver because that is part of the ODBC connection string.
Okay.
Cool. Let's just run it. Notice here I am also doing the Dataadapter and Dataset, just like before. So we're going to run this. Cross my fingers it works. Teehee. And voila! All right. Dat name, and we get the list of the databases from Postgres. I'm not going to go into depth like I did in MySQL because the same concepts apply here for parameterized queries. Be safe with your queries, look up information, hit up somebody with database experience if you have some questions, or PowerShell, hit us up. I'm happy to, when I have some time, reply back. But just be aware that, be safe. Just be aware of what you're writing, I guess.
I'm just curious, is dat name you being clever, or is that Postgres being clever?
It's fantastic, and I think it's Postgres being clever, and I'm selecting dat name from that database, and it made me laugh more than it should have. All right, moving on to SQL Server. This is a big one. This is my personal favorite. It's also what I cut my teeth on as a new IT person.
Okay.
I started out my life as a DBA butterfly, so I went and grabbed the ODBC driver for SQL just to show you that even though this is SQL Server, the same syntax applies for both Postgres and SQL Server here. So I'm going to get this information, import my credential, define my computer name and port, and then all these queries which I've actually already defined in another tab here. And then notice the connection string. I do have the different, instead of Postgres, I'm specifying that driver that I installed for SQL Server. And then we're going to run that. We're going to open it. We're going to do the same ODBC commands to generate a command, create a data set, create a data adapter, fill the data set, and close the things. And away we go. There we go. And it gets the list of the characters, which I also have a database called Futurama with a table called characters in SQL Server because I am so not creative and love Futurama.
So it's important to know this is a different database than the first one, just very similar name. You can tell because the IDs are different.
It's true, and that's actually why I did that. They're different. Thank you for pointing that out. Good eye. That makes me happy. That is the ODBC. .NET also has a provider called system.data.sql client. You can go Google that and look in the Microsoft documentation and find more about that. But similarly, here's how you can run the same query. I'm going to move this down a bit. And I have some stuff commented out here for deleting and inserting that I will show you here in a bit. But let's just highlight these and run it again. And we get the same results, which is to be expected because we're using a different way to connect to the database, but the information is the same. So I would expect that the information I return is the same. So yay, I'm actually happy that worked. In this case, one of the great things about database manipulation via PowerShell or any language really is you can start to specify and change how you want to do things with that database. In this case, I can define not a select command, I can define a delete command or an update command or an insert command with those queries that I defined above for deleting and inserting. And before we try that, just in case I did mess up or typo here, I'm just going to move on with some modules to show you those, and I'll come back. I hope. We'll see if there's time. Here, there is a SQL Server module just out there on the PowerShell gallery. You can install that just by using this install module, SQL Server. It's useful. I used that once upon a time. It works. I am not going to showcase that. Well, I guess we could. It won't matter. I believe I've actually probably already even imported that, so we'll do it anyway.
So is this the one where it returns instead of an object a string, though, or is that, am I thinking of something different?
You are thinking of something different, and I will get to that. I think SQLite is kind of what I do here. In this case, I'm just going to invoke this SQL, point to that server, and then run that query. Just to scroll over and see what it's doing there. Whoop, there's just my password and username. But this is it. I'm going to run that one line. And look at that. It returns.
It's true. PowerShell makes everything better.
I think so. That's far more simple. It's a one line to run that query. Well, one plus the query, and I define that another line. So more than one line, but at least this particular command is one line compared to all the things up here.
So with that one, did it auto-close it? Because I know we didn't specify to close the actual instance there.
That's a good question. I do not know off the top of my head. Yeah. I would have to dive into their literature.
I hope so.
I hope so too. That's actually kind of a tangent related. One thing to do and note, for any of these connections, if you're going to go this straight method, which is a nice way to learn how databases work and how they interact with these, with PowerShell and with everything else, I do recommend this. When you do the command to actually go out and reach and run the query, I recommend putting that into try catch finally loop. And then in the finally block, script block here, I would recommend putting all your closed connections there so that even if the command doesn't work or it blows up in transit, something happens, you're not left with some connection that's open and hanging. That way, if it doesn't even blow up, well, everything short of PowerShell.exe blowing up itself, when the command finishes, good or bad, it'll actually close the connection for you. If you don't know how to write a try-catch finally, just go ahead and look it up.
I think with finally, the only way it's not going to follow through with the close is if PowerShell itself is what hung.
Yeah. I know we're kind of running short on time here. Am I good to keep on continuing here?
Yeah, let's do SQLite.
Okay. Briefly, I do want to cover dbatools. It's
sure,
super
no
fast. Anybody using SQL Server at all, I'm going to make this call out, shout out, use dbatools module. It is the easiest, the best, and there's over 500 commands that you can use to interact with your SQL Server, from setting up replication, for doing configuration, for setting up anything and everything. Use it. dbatools.io is the website. You can import or install the module with install module dbatools. You can import it with import name dbatools.
That kind of lets you know how much it's liked as Microsoft added it to their own library where you don't have to go and download it. It's even the people that created PowerShell really like what it does.
Yeah, and it's telling me, hey, this other module, SQL Server, is already loaded. You might have some problems. Just be aware. You're going to get that if you load them both. But if you just load dbatools and not SQL Server, you'll not see this warning. But look how simple this is. Invoke DBA query, credential, and where I'm pointing. And I'm going to run that. Voila, results. Even better, I can create an instance of that and then query it. And I say even better because it's recyclable. So now I have my instance, which has everything about it. Now I can do my instance.query and fill in any query I want to do, whether it's the select query again or anything. And it's just so easy to use. And then really quick to wrap up the SQLite example, there are SQLite providers out there. There actually are for .NET, which are probably not half bad. Many years ago, I had an interaction with a PowerShell wrapper for those that I didn't quite like. It was really confusing. If you Google SQLite PowerShell provider, you'll see a couple. I think, I forget his name, but Rambling Cookie Monster, you'll find his blog with him talking about it, and he'll reference another one that's on GitHub. Take them out if you want the actual full-blown provider, because then, like PowerShell providers, you can browse them, get child item on the things there, and do all the fancy. But here, for most purposes that I use SQLite for, it's usually just select this, update that, delete from, who. And I don't care about an object result, because in this case, what I'm doing is I'm actually utilizing the actual application SQLite, and then pumping in the query and just kind of wrapping it in PowerShell. That's all. And so what I'm going to do here is just point to inventory here, and select all computers where name starts with G. We'll go. And we get Guinness and get Swifty. Easy peasy. And as extra bonus content, I think I included this in the scripts as well. I also have a blog where I do this, where I'm showing how to update information in our PDQ inventory database. So right here, I'm taking a custom field name, warranty expired, which has a type of text or string, and then I'm just going through and updating all the computers that I find from my query and setting the warranty expired value to false. And I just follow the blog, but I do want to show this in this webcast to get you excited because we use SQLite. If I go look at Guinness, notice that warranty expired has a value of nothing. If I go back to my query and I run this entire thing, just run the script, it'll go through and update. I can go back to inventory, go look at Guinness, and voila, value's false. If a value already existed, if it said true, if it said fancy, it said fabulous, it would overwrite that with false as well because I'm telling it to overwrite it. But there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do with databases.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is where no matter what database you're trying to get data from, you can use PowerShell to connect to that database, and you can use PowerShell to put it into your inventory. So you can always keep things up to date.
Yeah. So play around with it. There's a lot of things that you can do with PowerShell, like almost all the things.
Everything.
And databases are everywhere. So why not put them together? Because PowerShell's kind of been called the glue between the different systems that you can use to connect. And as you all know, I'm kind of partial towards it, so I think it's great.
As he says, I would use it for everything you're doing. But if you're looking for more complex stuff with inventory, this is a great start on how to get started with it.
Anyway, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, reach out to us. I'm happy to help with what I can. And I'm Chris.
I'm Jordan.
Thanks for joining our webcast today. As always, if you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to our support forums. That's why we have them. Have a fantastic week, and we'll see you back here next time.